Hi, welcome to Ideaspring's Founder in Focus podcast, where we talk to our founders to understand their vision, what the journey they've gone through, and where they want to take their company. Today, we are talking to founders of Ambee. I have here with me Maddie, Akshay, and in absentia Jaideep, who is in the US leading the sales for the company. I'd like to start off by asking you guys about what brought you all together and how you all came together to even conceive the vision of Ambee.
Uh, it's we have a story of how we all came together, how Ambee started. Very interesting. It all started in 2015, 2016. That time, I moved to Bangalore from Hyderabad. My son was 6 months old, and perfectly normal child, healthy, everything great about him. It started as a common cold and cough, and eventually it worsened, and so much to an extent that one of them doctor said he's turning asthmatic, and we were already giving him all sort of medicines and so on. And he used to wake up every day, like on clock, middle of the night, struggling to breathe, like coughing, choking. And doctor said we are following medical course. There's nothing we can do, nothing else we can do about it. Somehow, as a father, I couldn't sit by and just let this course be taken. So I put this monitor together to see what's happening when one of
You,
my
you built a hardware device.
but because one of my friends said it could also be the air quality. It could be, he said, he's a friend, is a doctor. He said it could be anything. It could be bed sheet, it could be the wall, it could be the air also. Anything. So we had changed everything in the house, but this air thing was something, it's not known what's happening. So I first Googled, before I built the monitor, I Googled and I saw the nearest air monitoring station is 13, 14 kilometers away in Silkboard. And it said on a Sunday afternoon it had rained in Bangalore and it looked 20, 25, everything good about it. But somehow I spent the next 4 or 5 hours put this monitor together. And then I slept. As usual, my son woke up and then we were handling him, and he slept and I couldn't sleep. I just see the data, and it looked really bad. It was very shocking what I saw. The air quality from that sensor was showing 600, 700. And that's where Ambee started to an extent, because after that I started measuring around, looking at what's happening around the area, and this was a pattern. Every night it would go high and it go down because there was nearby. It figured out after a lot of checking, 3-4 months later, it figured out that there is a garment factory and they were burning something in the night because workers would come in the day, and the whole entire neighborhood was suffering without knowing what's causing. And then the clinical study team, clinic guys also came. Some of the doctors joined our study. They got a few more parents involved. I built more of these devices. And then eventually it led to that air changes from time to time, from morning to night, from beginning of the road to the end of the road, before the rain, after the rain. It has a different pattern. It's mostly unmeasured, and this data was non-existent. So that's when I started doing BMC, kind of business model canvassing, met random parents and asked them whether they want this hardware or not. And in one of those cases, I'm a part of a startup leadership program, and I pinged out because I needed some help on some legal matters. That's when Jaideep, who's he's a senior fellow of that program, he pinged and he said I can help. That's when I and Jaideep started to talk along, and Jaideep introduced me to Akshay, and the three of us started talking around. Both of them were of the opinion that this is a massive global problem and it needs solved. Yes, the data is non-existent and everybody are affected. And then how this information helped save my son's life, because I moved him to another location where I tested that the air is better, and he recovered without any medicine in 10 days. So fast forward, he's 9 years old now. Akshay, Jaideep and Akshay went to school together. Akshay was in UK at that time, and Jaideep was in Europe. And this problem statement, this whole story was so strong. They both left whatever they were doing. They came here. We started Ambee in 2017. 2017. In 2017 we started in September.
So Akshay, so Maddie just told me that he built a hardware device, right? So what was your initial thought of putting so many hardware devices out there, across Bangalore city, and then trying to monitor the data? Initially it was okay, but what did you guys think about the scalability of the solution in those days? I just wanted to go back to those days and understand that.
Yeah, the good old days. So yeah, I mean, he built this, right? So that was so what I looked at it initially is when I met Maddie, I met him for something else. I moved back to India. So Jaideep said you should meet. Jaideep and I went to school together. And because Jaideep had sold a startup previously, I said, introduce me to some people and product. So the minute what he said, the impact, we're not looking at money or anything, right? But there's a billion people in India who are affected by air pollution. And that time a billion in China also, let's say. And forget the rest of the world, just these two countries. The scale, if you're able to save your kid, that was just something massive. And people are calling him at this point and saying, please help us, please help my child. Can I? So we said, this has something to it. So we both moved back and we started this. We started by selling monitors. Nothing great about the tech. We went to China. We sourced out a few suppliers, and we sold a few. We sold like a couple of hundred maybe, made a little money. But then we realized very quickly that you get stuck in this sort of logistics game and branding game. You're not really building anything uh, that you're proud of. Let's put it that way. So at the same point, so our thing was always we need better data, right? Because that's what saved my youth. So we said, okay, no one else is mapping Bangalore because we found out the sensor is like 15 kilometers away. It's pretty useless. So we put all these little sensors, very small. Like if you remember pagers, right? We are from that generation where pagers are still there. We said we'll put these in autos. So we incentivized the auto guys like $100 a week. They all have smartphones. And we got data. We wrote an app for it. We got data. So we started seeing massive data tracks, right? Like we were 1 million to 10 million X denser than anyone else who had data. So we could tell you any street, 5 p.m. versus 8 p.m., same street, what the data is like. So if you're going for a walk, 8 p.m. is cleaner. If you're picking a playground for your kid, this time is better, this playground is better, this school is better. All these, so these make a difference, right? To like, if you live somewhere over 25 years, it makes a difference to your cancer rates. If your kid goes to school somewhere for 10 years, it makes a difference. All of this was a very big deal for us. So then we said, can we scale this? Now, this was about 2017, 2018. All Swiggy and Zomato raising a lot of money for operational heavy things. So we can't afford that. Like first of all, we are not taking salaries. Then operations manager, you have to pay 50 lakhs, not out of the question. So we said, how do we build something very similar? We had gone to a Google accelerator in Switzerland. So they were very impressed with what you're doing in Bangalore. They also said, look, we'll buy your data. So far, whatever we bought, you've only seen when you Googled it, is not accurate. So if you scale this up to 3-4 cities in India, we'll buy data. So that's the first time we realized this could be a business. Like we'll make money. But how do we scale it? Now we don't have the money to do this. And it's very operationally heavy, and then it's not a reliable metric. So at the same point, we said we should build a data first model, because data by definition is infinitely scalable, right? If you can build the right models. And this was a time where everyone had discovered this phrase, data is the new oil. So we said, how do we build this? And then, of course, we put up sensors. We used it as training data for our models, right? And that's what really differentiated us. I mean, Maddie can go into the depths, but to date, our models are better than anyone else on the planet. We're able to do this because we collected data for 3-4 years at a very high, like we can tell you, this main road versus 100 meters inside where you live. That's the sort of data we were looking at to understand and model this. And then, of course, over time, you do this over 3-4 years, you take into account seasons and all of that. And of course, India is very big as well. So in India, you have nearly every climatic condition over 0 degrees, just in 3-4 cities. You pick Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. From Delhi is 2-3 degrees in winter, 48 in summer. Bombay is by the sea, humid. Bangalore is sort of almost a hill station. So you can get all of this data. So that was how we built out what we have today.
Cool. So tell me, like, initially you had these hardware devices, and at what point did you say, look, we have to go beyond just these hardware devices and look for satellite data or other data streams? And I know we also went and got signed up with NASA to get early access. And how did that happen? Why did NASA get interested to say, we'll give you early access to the data? What did they see in Ambee that they signed up for that?
So I'll let that NASA thing is completely missed. Photographs is on NASA website, by the way. But I'll tell you when it changed for us. By about 2018, about after a year of like selling devices, etc., we realized that it has to be data driven if you want to go international. And so Maddie began to work on a bunch of models. And I remember the exact date was Jan 4th, 2019, because we had a review meeting with, whoever was our advisors and whoever we knew. And he showed us the results of the model. I let him talk about it, but that's the day I knew that we can scale this. This can be big in some way or the other.
Yeah, it was our first official board meeting. So how do you shift from, okay, the problem statement is still the same, but now our solution is different. The problem is people need this information, but they don't need the device. So now instead of giving this device, how do you empower everyone to know what they're breathing right outside their door? So it became from a hardware to a data science problem statement. So in that angle, search started to understand, because when you're measuring something like what you're breathing or like air pollution, it's not measure of just from the sensors. And also we were not solving the problem if we were selling the device. We're solving the problem by giving the data. So it's also so when you're measuring air pollution, it's not just sensors are not enough. You will have to measure human activities, because 99% of air pollution is anthropogenic. It's created by humans. So what are those activities? So when you consume emissions, when you consume energy, you create emissions, and when emissions create air pollution. So to map the whole, energy flow of all of that, we started mapping, and we came across for the first time. I came across remote sensing, Earth observation as a thing, and then there was some open data available. We became a part of a program. Again, coming from Zurich in Switzerland, I had ETH told me about very lightly at that time, or European Space Agency, they were doing something. But the data is pretty good. It's columnar data, but very, very low resolution. But it had population density, topography, vegetation, satellite images. And then when I combined on ground, and they also had particulate matter, aerosol optical depth, it's called particulate matter data. So when I combined, we came up with a way of fusing on ground sensors and satellite data, and with these additional variables. And slowly, without, when I started asking questions, okay, now where is this source of this pollution coming from? Is there a factory nearby? Let's map all the industries area. So we went to Google Places. Then, okay, this is not traffic. So there are three most highest emitters: transport, buildings, and industries. So we mapped all the transport buildings. For transport, we got historical data from a few vendors. There are certain providers who provide traffic data, live and historical. And when we studied it, there was a clear pattern. And that's when we published a paper. We wrote about how all these interplay of things is what is causing, how it's so important to factor these variables. We came up with our own algorithm to forecast. All the interpolation methods were falling short. Our algorithm came up with the lowest error. We published it. That's got the interest of somebody referred us to a program that NASA is launching, this new hyperspectral satellite, and they were the first ones to launch hyperspectral satellite. And you would get ground station access, early adopter, and their simulated data available. We were already writing a few things to work with those data sets, because they were giving data on FTP then. Now they have different mechanism, but that FTP was slower. So we had developed certain things, and we were contributing some value back. They said, why not? They liked it. There are three different scientists who came on board as it's still helping us and advising us. They said, why don't you try this out? And we tried. They really liked what we've done with it. How we built this pipeline. What took 3 hours to process, we processed in under 30 seconds. So these kind of innovation and this live data feed that's coming from a satellite for a use case like what we are going after, really liked for them. So they were the first ones, early adopters of hyperspectral data. Then onwards, we went on to add a lot of other things. That's how we become part of NASA PACE satellite program, and now all the best Earth observatory satellites are input data to us.
So NASA is you have a like easy early access to the data from, and is that helping you to stay ahead of the competition, or it just help you to build the model accurately? How is it helping you today?
Definitely, we are. You have to wait a certain seasons, multiple years of seasons. You have to pass 3 summers, 4, 5 winters to understand different variable interplay. And then when you have someone like a NASA's early access to hyperspectral data, which a lot of others probably trying to solve this problem may not have, it definitely puts us way ahead of others, because a model is as good as the data you can feed, right? So although we had looked at every possible element, and we had the best advice coming into us from the science point of view and the best data, So we suddenly stayed away, we shot up ahead. It also led us to build additional things. So from air quality, we went to build onto pollen because of the hyperspectral imagery. We mapped out the whole world. We built our own model that classifies between tree, weed, and grass, and what type of different type of species. So we have a full, uh, you can say, a database of what trees where, what species it is across the world, and when it's pollinating, where its pollen is spreading. So these kind of innovations started to appear from our side. Then wildfire forecast. Now we're into, expanded into climate and other things. I think the start was from NASA.
So Akshay, at what point did you, as founders, realize that with this use cases and all, now we really have a company that can scale, and then decided to say, all right, it's good time to go raise capital from the market?
So yeah, that's a great question, because when you build, as you've seen, journeys of deep tech companies, there's a long gestation period, if you can call it that. We actually, at the start, we were doing hardware. So our first angel round came saying, we will sell monitors. As the problem gets worse in India, people will buy monitors. And we are very clear at that point that we don't do solutions in that sense. We do data, we do awareness, and then there are, of course, commercial applications built on top of data, which is what we do today. I think by about 20, then COVID came, so everything slowed down. We had raised a seed round just before COVID, actually, not when the markets went crazy, but before that. And we said we can build this data out about end 2021. Our models were super accurate, but then we figured no one buys data in India. We're not a data-driven economy in that sense, right? So who will you sell to? And pollution, the answer is always you sell to the West, you sell to EU, US. But pollution, not such a big problem there. But we had a very close parallel in pollen data. So pollen behaves very similarly to air pollution in every way. And because Bangalore is the garden city, sort of tree capital of India, we had a lot of first-hand experience studying this. We have trees in Bangalore from all across the world for over 150, 200 years. I mean, from when Kempegowda founded Bangalore, it was plant trees. So we have trees like the jacaranda, which are actually from Brazil, but no one knows that, right? So we mapped all of this. We have very good pollen data. So we said, this must be useful to someone. So we basically, and I would sneeze all the time. The joke is like, data is built because of my allergies. So we said, this must be useful to someone somewhere, right? Someone who has allergies must need this. So Jaideep came up with this idea, right? He said, we can sell pollen data. This is the sophistication of a sales process. We found every breathing guy on LinkedIn, and we messaged their head of marketing or brand owner or whatever, saying, look, we have this pollen data. It's predictive. So we can tell you where people will sneeze in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So you can place ads better. And ads are basically the foundation of the internet today. So our first contract was like $600 a month, very small. That relationship is $250,000 today with the same company.
Best way to expand business.
Yeah, best way, right? So for us, like I said, sophistication of sales process is basically we're sending message on LinkedIn. The minute someone uses the data, they're like, oh my God, we've been waiting for this all our life. So you've spoken to some of these guys and they'll tell you, we didn't replace Ambee with anyone. We didn't replace anyone with Ambee rather. This is the first of its kind. And all our customers, see 20% increase in revenue on bunch of ad metrics, your view through rates, click through rates, time per video, everything 60%, 2x, 5x. Super happy. And then, so we got pharma companies, right? So pharma companies are very, very particular about data. So if you show up late because Google Maps is off, not a problem. It is what it is. Traffic, the app is free. You'll say, I'm sorry, I'm late. You'll still use Google Maps to leave that meeting. Pharma guys are not like that. So in the US or anywhere, if a pharma person, in India, they're not allowed to advertise, but in the US, if they put out a bad ad saying, pollen is high, buy our thing, and it's not high, the FDA, which is the nodal authority, will crack down on them big time. There'll be an inquiry, their stock price will drop, which is all important for a CEO. And most likely in the US, there's a class action lawsuit somewhere where people will sue you saying you've tried to cheat us, which is very well known. So these guys would test our data for 8-9 months. Then come back and say, okay, we want to buy it. First, it would be your advertising, small $10, $20, $30,000 use case. Now we do everything across the pharma chain. So we do clinical trials, which is the foundation of the pharma business, right? These guys spend billions on clinical trials. We're the only data provider for allergies there. Then we do demand forecasting. Just like the advertising, we can tell you people are losing a lot of money. Like the US is a massive country. Even Amazon Prime is 2-day delivery in the US. So these guys don't know where to stock up. If there's a pollen storm, there's no stock, they're losing. On the other hand, somewhere where there's no need, they've overstocked. So we help them solve this problem also. So again, massive problems. And it's what we do. Basically, we don't talk about like, climate risk or resilience or transition. We say, look, climate affects everybody, right? The heat, you buy a soft drink because it's hot outside, you buy a kid an ice cream because it's hot. That's an effect of climate changing your consumption pattern. The same way, because climate changes pollen, people are buying medication differently, and we can help predict that. And these guys, as a result, there's a massive delta on their revenue for them.
So pollen is one use case.
Yeah.
As you start to, this is probably a question I'm going to ask later as well. What are the other immediate use cases? So there is a short term, mid term, and a long term, right? So pollen and air quality, say, is short term. What's your mid term and long term thought on where this is going to go?
So, we've built very strangely. So we have a wildfire model that's being tested now. And the January wildfires lost a lot of resources, and a lot of life was lost in LA and the surrounding areas. We had, when we backtest, we had predicted the medium to high risk areas 3 weeks before. So by December 14th or 15th, our model was saying in the next 3 weeks, this area, it has a high risk of wildfires breaking out, and then commensurately there's a loss, etc. All of this is because we started seeing that air quality would randomly spike. This is 2 years ago. We'd see air quality randomly spiking in some random location. It's always 5, 5, 5, 5, 200, which is physically impossible. So we said our model is not working. So then we checked our model's working, same model that, it's working somewhere else, why is it not working here? Then when we backtested it over a few years, we realized these are all in the wilderness, there's a wildfire nearby. So, like you light an agarbatti in the room, you'll smell it immediately, wherever it is in the room. Same thing with wildfire, they'll change air quality very fast. So about 2 years ago, we realized this basic truth that was happening, and it was alerting much faster than anything else at that point. Now, obviously, small company, we just started selling pollen that time. We said we'll take it slow, but we'll build a model out that should understand like a 4-week to 6-month risk period and what it is like. We're not telling you something like, tomorrow 3 p.m. this location is going to be wildfire. We're saying the next 4 weeks, boss, you should take precautions in these areas. Like, whether it is having firefighters on standby, or if you have movable property, get it out of there, etc. So that, I think, is a very big, of course, it's a very big use case, also very big impact, because you see your house go up in flames, you see, your life is destroyed, you lose someone you love. If you have and this is the actual power of data, the climate data, is to be able to forestall these occurrences and at least move away from a high risk point.
Isn't it hard to, like, these wildfire predictions or whatever? It's hard, very hard to solve these problems and then do something predictable. So why would anybody should trust what Ambee is doing in terms of wildfire? What is that we can tell that we are confident that people should start trusting us?
It's also, I'll come back to trust, but it's also the market is evolving. Climate intelligence is what is a new term that's used, and it's kind of replacing or adding on top of what used to be business intelligence. And information like these kind of forecasts, this categorizing of risk is scarce in the market today, but people need it a lot. So much that Jaideep, who is in the US, just to talk about these use cases, right? Because the markets are, everybody needs this supply chain, banking. You might have seen, the wildfires are increasing, natural disasters are increasing. Earlier, we never used to talk so much about temperature and rainfall as often as we are talking these days. So the disasters are increasing. Allergy incidents are increasing. So it's also having an effect on health. It's having an effect on an infrastructure, on governments, on economies of scale, on everything. So suddenly it opens up so many areas. So it becomes, if someone is able to provide something and prove a value point, that's where beginning of the trust happens. Then you have to prove as the occurrences happen, there is a lot of these things happen. So we already a trusted brand in the market with what we've done with pollen, what we've done with weather, air quality. Now, if you're saying, it's the same way, if tomorrow Apple launches, say, the HomePod that they did, you would trust it because you have a brand, you have the trust with their products already existing. And we are taking the scientific approach always. So we've never undercut anything in the name of a use case. So always make sure that it took time, but you delivered it scientifically.
Nice. So hence, in terms of where we are building the company, is like the foundational layer of data we are quite confident about. Now we are trying to build different capabilities on top of it, right? And of course, you can add more and more parameters to the data that you get and then start predicting models. I know we are also looking at flu and other things and the influence of weather also going forward. But the central thesis being that all the data that you can gather about climate and other things will have a...
The core is the data. The core layer is data. So there are 52 essential climate variables. 38 of them we measure at a very high dense granularity. The core is data. On top of it sits our APIs. And top of those, the demand forecast, the trials, and then a few, the risk side of it on the wildfire. So, then there is the health side. We have influenza like illness forecast and flu forecast. And then there is a map layer, tile layer, there is a GIS layer of all. So these form our specific products for different use cases. Like the tiles go for media and other use cases. The webhooks and other things go for advertising use cases. The trials, the demand forecast integrates into an existing supply chain and so on.
Cool. So I'll switch the topics here a little bit and talk about founders, right? So I jokingly tell everybody that founders is like a short-term marriage, because marriage is a lifelong commitment, but founders, not necessarily need to have a lifelong commitment, because no company will be there for lifelong, but for a period of time where you want to create something very significant in the market, you have to stay together, right? And then there will be a lot of disagreements, fights, critical, thinking, so on and so forth. What has been your journey? Because this people don't talk about it as much. What has been your experience in this over the past, since you guys came up together in 2016, 2017, 8 years? Yeah, right, 8 years. So that's the freaking long time. So, and then, I'm sure it will be another 5 to, yeah, it's not yet, another 5 2 years, right? That's why I say it's a short-term marriage, it's like 10 to 15 years of somebody's lifetime and most critical part of the lifetime. So what has been your experience, and what would be your inputs to other founders who are trying to build something similar?
So actually at this point, Jaideep and I have been married not as long as we've been in Ambee. So this is longer term for us, right? And these days, you can never tell with either. Maddie luckily has been married a little longer. So it's a great question. I think we've done a lot of introspection on this as three of us. You put three reasonably smart people who are working towards a goal. Everyone will always think they're doing something better than someone else. And that's true. Like, I can never be a data scientist. And Maddie could, but he doesn't want to deal with accounts or operations or investors or sales or any of that, right? So you have to be very clear on what you're good at and humble enough to know what you're not good at. And I think one thing that has worked for us is we all have equal equity. He has 3 shares more, which is, I think, 0.01% more. But
I think that's a good start. I mean, that kind of plays the level playing field for everybody if contributions are...
So that's very important to us, right? To make sure that we all have equal equity. And of course, there was we come to this agreement organically. There was no pushback on it from anyone. And the reason is that, look, you're building a company. This is it's not a pastime. It is essentially an enrichment device, right? If you can put that way. You want to make money for yourself, for your investor, for everyone who works with you. And of course, you're making money for your customer. Otherwise, the company doesn't exist. Now, that is the primary goal, which people tend to forget with ego hassles. Now, we were very lucky in that our egos played less of a role than our need to get things done, because we were always, deep tech company are always 6 months or 8 months away from, ruin. So we can't afford to focus on anything. We've had disagreements. We've had changes in responsibilities, for example. But we've never been at a point where it's become more important to protect an ego or something than, protect what you've built. And what you built is collective. This, you built a $50 or $100 million company. We're somewhere in that range now. How do you ensure that that's what you want, that's what you're here for? And I've been personally, I think we're very lucky that we are now at this point where when one of us calls the other, our wives will say, oh, your other wife is calling at this point, right? Which is probably very common with startup founders. We talk, 2-3 times a day. It's a continuous exchange of information, thoughts, emotions, ideas, which is key. Communication is always the key. So, Jaideep now lives 9.5 hours away as far as time zones go. But we are always talking.
And that's when you realize that, you need to have one founder selling in the US, and that's when one founder will,
Oh, sorry to digress. But the day, so Jerry moved, and within a month, he had a meeting with one of our, at that time, potentially largest customers. And he met her, and we have a US sub, which we bill out of. And she told us to our face, she told Jerry, oh, great, you're here, you're billing out of US entity, now we can trust you. And we saw a step change in, it wasn't even linear, it was a hockey stick in the way contracts would start increasing. So massive, I mean, there's no way to undersell that.
That's sorry, saying something.
They how much the three of us talk. When we were introspecting, we talk to each other more than we talk to our wife. So that's one litmus test. So and the more you talk, the less there is to fight. The more there is resolve. And we've had our disagreements, but some of them have been progressive. It's all about, like Akshay said, okay, future for what we have to do. It was never malice. It was never damaging. It was more about, okay, always in the interest of Ambee. So that is something I feel we three of us align with. But no matter what happens, it's it's all everything. Nothing is above us, above Ambee. It's not like we are stuck on something.
Someone asked me this. So I said, we've been as bad as it gets. We've seen that we've been bottom. First of all, we don't have salaries. Then we don't have money, so we are taking on loans to pay salaries. So no one in our company has ever gotten a salary late. I mean, this is a few years ago, but we had to take on debt now. I said, when you've come through that, now you're making money, you're sort of profitable, etc. Why would you give it up now? We've seen the worst, and these bad times are what brings out real conflicts. At that point, we had no conflict.
And that wasn't stress, but that was good pressure for us to be.
That's always important. I always tell, don't let pressure translate to stress, because that's when all hell breaks loose.
That low is needed to come up. We had to get to a certain low there.
I mean, I'd rather not, but it happened anyway.
It happens. So what's the plan for the next 5 years? Where do you want Ambee to be in the next 5 years?
So look, we're on this sort of edge of profitability right now. We don't track it as a A1 metric. It's not our North Star, but we're there. We can slash a little cost and be profitable. We were last year, then we gave, reasonably big hikes, etc. It's always important when the sort of business that we run to in this range. Our gross margins are pretty high, as you know. With what we do, again, costs tend to be low. We own a bunch of foundational data, and we will keep building on it and owning it. What we're seeing is that this will become more and more important. We have a lot of use cases coming into us. We have sovereign mortgage funds, for example, hedge funds, traders coming and asking us for data. And I'm not going to take names, but each of these guys is top 3. Pharma companies, anyway, very established business for us, right? When I took these examples, each of these guys, top 3 in their field globally, have approached us for data. And all of them are no nonsense. They're not worried about anything except timely delivery of very accurate data. And they know us. So if you we've had a lot of larger funds talk to us and come back and say we did diligence. We're very surprised. Everyone in pharma knows you. We are a name brand now. So I think building on that trust in a few other, like you said, parlaying that trust into a few other adjacent fields will really reward us well over the next few years. And we've always believed, even when we had no money, that if you build something scientifically ground up, it's something that's defensible in the very long term. You're not running a trading business. You own IP on this. And this gets super important. So now you'll see there are a bunch of companies that are building climate data globally. Very well respected, great tech. One of them, for example, has a co-founder who's a Nobel Prize winner. They've raised decent sums of money. They're solving real problems. Like, they can tell you your house is next to another house on a beach. Your house 25% higher risk of flood than the guy next to you. So that's the sort of accuracy they're at, right? So there are solid business cases for building this sort of stuff, and we want to be able to do it and say we did it out of India.
And what is your competition landscape looking like today? And what do you expect the competition to be in the next few years?
In certain areas, there is really good competition, but we have differentiated ourselves into being a company that is into specific areas of climate health. Like, for example, there isn't anyone who is doing demand forecast for a pharmaceutical company using climate data. There is somebody doing weather and so on, but not climate. So only now we started building products on top of our data. So there is also nobody doing something looking into climate health. There are weather companies, they are giving out weather data, but they're not looking at climate health, how human health is affected, and how can you enable a pharma to build a better drug, or how do you give that real world exposure evidence of exposure of patients, and then onwards to taking micro actions from to large enterprise to stay resilient to all that's happening. So if we had to say, if we had started 10 years before, there would be no competition. But today, and 10 years later, probably would be too late. But today, we have very little competition, and some of them are launching satellites into Earth observatory, which is great for us. We could take those data and consume, make our data even better. So we are in this space of consuming what best is out there and using it to specific use cases that help an organization impact from day one.
So, Maddie and Akshay, thanks a lot. It was awesome talking to you guys. Missed talking to Jaideep as well. It would have been awesome to have him with us as well. But wishing you guys, all you guys, three of you, the very best of luck in building a company that is going to solve global problems. And very happy for Ideaspring as well, so that we are associated with you. Like we said, not only the founders, you'll be talking to us on a daily basis as well. And hope you enjoy. And best of luck going forward.
This is all
Always a
ours.
pleasure speaking
Yeah.
from three of us. Thank you so much.
Thank